By the way, can you hear me okay at this distance from my microphone, or do I need to get closer?
It's fine. We're on the air.
Excellent. Oh, okay. Let's go. All right, friends. Welcome back to day number 3 for the Deep Truth Symposium, Visionaries Speak Out. As you can imagine, with any other kind of live event, particularly involving high technology, there can be some technical issues which arise at the most inconvenient times, and that's what happened this morning. However, we're ready to go now with our presentation, first of today on Sunday here, and it is entitled Dark Technology, Geoengineering 5G, Smart Meters and Other Faustian Bargains. You know, we like to assume that new technological advances are being done to benefit mankind, when in fact, perhaps most of them move forward because there is an economic benefit to the people who are supplying the cash to create them. And there may or may not be great benefits for mankind and humankind and womankind after that. And it appears that there are technologies being introduced, of course, as always, that may not have the best results for us that we would like. So we're going to talk about that today. We're going to begin our discussion with Elana Freeland, and she is going to discuss with us, you know, what is going on in the upper atmosphere, chemtrails, HAARP, full spectrum dominance of planet Earth. And she's got a book, Under an Ionized Sky, From Chemtrails to Space Fence Lockdown. She's published several other books, particularly about deep state history. And we're very, very interested in to hear from Elana. And Elana, welcome to Deep Truth Visionaries Speak Out.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and with my cohorts who will be coming after me. I'd like to begin. I have a half hour, so I'm going to move at lightning pace. I want to read a sort of desideratum that I will cover a lot of the things that otherwise I might haltingly go through. We are living in strange science fiction times. Issues upon which the future welfare of the earth and its peoples hinge are marginalized as conspiracy theory, and scientists and doctors who step forward to sound the alarm are discredited, ostracized, or killed. High-tech research is dominated by military and defense corporate grant monies, compartmentalization and need-to-know security clearance, and non-disclosure agreements signed in blood, while the good old boy peer review system plays gatekeeper. Despite the mis and disinformation that must be waded through, the internet has become our town square and university, all wrapped in one, particularly for researchers probing beneath the national security shroud, thrown over full spectrum dominance technologies coming online daily at a pace that defies reason. What university could one turn to for the kind of information we need in order to comprehend what the national security state is up to, especially now that universities have been militarized? We are all working to frame the context of how all the pieces fit together and what they say about the future already here. What we are piecing together is the scattered parts of an ancient globalist dream of power, hidden from we, the people. Our formal education taught us to compartmentalize issues. Now we must learn to discern how they are connected by a common globalist intent. For example, how CERN, ionospheric heaters, and wind turbines are calibrated by artificial intelligence to work together for space fence lockdown. The issues of our day are sophisticated, technological, and planetary. They goad us to act beyond our personal lives in one battlefield after another, in a vast spiritual war for the future of humanity and the definition of life itself. Extreme weather, vaccinations, GMOs, water quality, immune system degeneration, dying animal species, acid oceans, alkalinized soil, mind control, and targeting are all occurring simultaneous with the moral breakdown of society, the death of the middle-class dream, the rise of Agenda 2030 smart cities, artificial intelligence, neuroscience, and transhumanism. All are parts of the elite Luciferian dream known as globalism. Geoengineering the Earth's atmosphere is not just about weather, wireless communication, drones, and directed energy weapons. It is about aiding in the breakdown of the immune system so that the human being and all of life on Earth can be genetically altered. From here on out, we must learn to think big picture. Next slide, please. The Tesla quote. I wanted to illuminate the whole Earth. There is enough electricity to become a second sun. Light would appear around the equator as a ring around Saturn. As we know, the technology today can be laid at the feet of Nikola Tesla. And he had a very different dream in mind. He did not perceive that what he was bringing would be weaponized, but it has been weaponized. The video, please.
Scientists have discovered a human-made barrier around Earth, protecting against the natural particle radiation in space. They believe the bubble was formed by very low-frequency waves, or VLFs. VLFs have been found to interact with the particles in space, affecting how and where they move. VLFs are used for radio communications, including with submarines, because they can penetrate deep into the ocean. The waves can also travel far into the environment around Earth. By understanding more about how VLF transmissions help shape our space environment, we learn more about this complex region surrounding us. The more we know, the more situational awareness we have to protect our satellites from natural radiation in space.
Wonderful NASA film showing how there has been a bubble has been made around the Earth. And it's important for us to know this because this program that geoengineering is covering over is actually a space program, the secret space program, you could call it. It certainly is being kept secret from us. And the funding of it is certainly something that investment analyst Catherine Austin Fitz has gone deeply into several times. So let's begin in space. This VLF, very low frequency bubble, is probably equivalent to the ring around the planet that is being formed by the rocket launches, the sounding rocket launches into near Earth orbit, which is spewing many, many nanoparticles, trillions of nanoparticles of conductive metals. And those conductive metals then are captured in the centrifugal force of the Earth field and eventually spin down and settle around the equator as a ring. And I wanted to show this film because this is the only thing I've seen so far whereby NASA is admitting to the ring being formed. When I asked Billy Hayes, the HAARP man, what that ring would mean for planet Earth, there are so many meanings, but the one that really stuck in my mind that Billy said was that it was like this ring would be a CD-ROM. It would be a CD, and it would be used for communication. It could record. It can be used interplanetarily. It can also be used, which is what I maintain in the Under an Ionized Sky book, as a space fence lockdown. So in a way, we're sandwiched between the wireless technology on Earth that has been put up at an amazing speed, and this ring forming in Earth orbit around the equator, so that we are now living in a bubble. We now live under the dome. Slide, please. This was I have never owned a television, but this was a television series that ran a few years ago. And it was about a town that suddenly realized it was living under a dome, and they could not get out, and nothing could get in. And the drama ran for about a year and a half. Yeah, I'm sure it was pre-programming us for what we're living under now. Next slide, please. That would be inside, which it looks like this. So now, if we could but see our wonderfully convenient, entertaining wireless world, we would realize that we are being we are in a net, in a grid, we are plugged in to this Tesla dome that we live under, this ULF ring around the planet. It's all of one piece. And our nervous system and our blood and brain are now plugged in. The next slide, please, the quote by Daniel Petraeus. Here is General Petraeus. As you know, he left office rather suddenly, and the cover story was an affair with someone, but I'm sure there were other reasons. Here he actually gives us the hint of how we're being plugged in. Items of interest will be located, identified, monitored, and remotely controlled through technologies such as radio frequency identification, sensor networks, tiny embedded servers, and energy harvesters, all connected to the next generation internet using abundant, low-cost, and high-power computing. The next slide, please. Before, during, and after. Here we have a picture of what General Petraeus is talking about. Of course, we weren't told that, but we can put things together ourselves now, given that we have the University of the Internet, and we are now in a course of discovering what is being done to us in our name, with our money, but being held secret from us. So we're all familiar with this. This is the chemtrails period, the last 2 decades of geoengineering known as chemtrails. Again, I remind people that the term chemtrails is something that is straight from the military. It was on the United States Air Force Academy chemistry manual in 1990. It was also referred to in the executive portion of the HAARP patents. So you have the before, the during, and the after. A shroud is being thrown over planet Earth, and it is essential for weather engineering. It's essential for wireless communications, so that there are particulates in the atmosphere constantly being ionized by the ionospheric heaters, by zapping the ionosphere, and all of those ions coming down the magnetic lines of force and utilized in the atmosphere for a variety of military operations that I'll soon show in a slide. The next slide are the clouds of 20 years. So we'll stay with the first cloud here first, and then we'll go to the second in a moment. This just shows that these are not the cumulus nor the cirrus clouds of yesteryear. This is a very different cloud. This is a chemical cloud. You can see by the shredded nature of its edges that we're looking at chemistry here. We're looking at something that is not just water condensation and particulates. This is chemistry. And the chemistry is producing plasma clouds, and plasma is the fourth state of matter. So plasma physics has become all the rage, along with astrophysics, and much of these clouds that are being formed are being monitored. They're being sensors are in them. There are trillions, probably trillions of sensors in just this one cloud, collecting data, sending it back to Control Central of the C4 operations, command, control, communications, and cyber warfare. The next cloud, please. Here you see that shredded nature of a chemical cloud. So we need to become astute cloud observers, not to assume that we're just looking at water condensation and particulates and gases. These are being formed. They're experimental clouds in many cases. They have a purpose, and part of it is to cover over the Earth. And that itself has many implications. The next slide being nano aluminum delivery systems. Around the world, installations in service to the space fence are all digitally calibrated to one another. Digital wireless technology in an atmosphere constantly ionized by conductive metal nanoparticles is turning our soil alkaline and our oceans and blood acidic. The conductive aluminum nanoparticles falling from the sky and being drilled into the earth are for military industrial intelligence agendas of control. So here, what I want you to see in 1 and 2 is that the chemical signatures of the spraying being done by the jets, as well as the rocket launches, which I'll talk about in a moment, these are identical. And this is purposeful. This is the chemical signature is something that is essential to accurate calibration of electromagnetic operations. So even fracking wells, the wells that are everywhere and that we are now tying to small earthquakes, even there, to get the C4 ignition, they need the same chemical signature injected into the well. So then the sounding rockets, here when Billy Hayes talked about the amazing number of tons of aluminum per annum that are just in the exhaust plume of the rockets. And as you know, rockets are going up daily in the United States now that they're either putting satellites up, or they're up there doing sensor operations for space situational awareness, or called SSA by the military. The next slide, please. Let's see, MATRA, the magnet-assisted transfection. This is process of aerosol dispersion and olfactory uptake of aluminum encapsulated nanoparticles containing weaponized RNA. Now we're getting into something else. It's not just chemistry. Now we're getting into genetic implications of what is we're being doused with from the sky. Cyclotron resonance, or high power Wi-Fi microwave energy, is the catalyst that opens ionic plasma cell wall membranes, permitting weaponized RNA to recombine with healthy DNA. So the cyclotron resonance is not the equivalent of microwave energy. Cyclotron resonance is kind of how we operate. We are resonant beings. All of life is resonant, and these frequencies can be pulsed and affected remotely. And again, we see here that one of the ways would be through aluminum nanoparticles to attach weaponized RNA. And this is what we breathe in. Cyclotron resonance also fractures healthy DNA, creating an ideal biological environment for spontaneous recombination. And recombinant DNA and recombinant genetics are the name of the game. And at the end it says, this is why you are sick. Next slide, please. Forced nanotechnology integration. This is a chart, it's not very easy to read. I apologize for that. But this is created by Tony Pantalaresco and Suzanne Marr, two Canadian activists that are really pursuing the health angle of what we're breathing from the chemical trails overhead, and supplemented by other things such as GMO foods and vaccinations. So the nanotechnology taken in through eating, breathing, and exposure, it gestates 24 to 72 hours, upon which it will morph and assimilate, the beginning of breaking down, etc. And you can read that you can find forced nanotechnology integration on the internet. I would like to go to the last slide now, military intelligence operations, just to give you an idea of how vast this program is that we are encountering from the sky, and supplemented now by two other delivery systems, at least. The GMOs that 28 countries so far have refused to allow to enter their borders, and yet in the United States, this is what all the people eat, and vaccinations, which are piggybacking all manner of things into very small infants. So military intelligence operations dependent upon an ionized atmosphere. Yes, first we have weather engineering, geoengineering of the weather, and that is essential because to keep a sky ionized, you can use weather operations to do that as well. It's sort of an Ouroboros, a snake eating its own tail. You can use the energy in the atmosphere to create weather events, and then you use the weather events to heighten the ionized energy in the atmosphere. So then next, the military intelligence, in military industrial intelligence are very involved in chemical and electromagnetic atmospheric testing, experimentation, and operations. This is when you see very strange things in the sky and you don't know quite where they're coming from, or a lot of people will jump to the UFO alien theme, which is, of course, what the military industrial intelligence complex likes, that we don't think things through, that we don't go and gather information before we make a summary judgment on what we're seeing. So a lot is going on there, and a lot of it is plasma experimentation. Then you have the planetary geophysical operations. I've been thinking about it lately because Europe is just being hammered by flooding situations. So I'm assuming that the atmospheric rivers, we have 2 or 3 above us in the higher atmosphere, I'm assuming that they're just being deluged for possibly disaster capitalists who want to make a buck off of people's disasters, or that a message is being sent to the European Union by someone with the power to run these operations. So geophysical operations, what's going on in Hawaii right now, in Puna on the Big Island with the volcanic eruption that goes on and has destroyed many homes. What went on in the Santa Rosa fire? These are all possible geophysical operations. Then there are directed energy warfare operations, and those have to do with weapons. There are plasma weapons in space. Many of the satellites are armed. So none of this is really laid out to us in the name of not allowing enemies abroad to know what we have. But I feel that is a cul-de-sac that allows many things to go on that should not go on, that have to do with our welfare here on Earth. Then the surveillance neural operations. This morning I was contacted by yet another targeted individual. There are hundreds of thousands now being experimented on in their own homes, in their workplaces. This also is part of this space fence lockdown that is coming from the sky. And finally, I arrive at the most alarming of all, the biological transhumanism operations. This is what my next book is about. I have begun writing about synthetic biology, and it will be the 3rd book in the series, and hopefully the last one I write. We're going to talk about 5G a little later, and I want to go into some of the transhumanist aspects of the 5G and, of course, the biological impact, because I do believe that the 5G is the final coup de grace, the linchpin by which the entire space fence lockdown will be able to be set in place. And I think that's all the time I have, and I appreciate everyone. Please go to my website, ElanaFreeland.com. You can buy the books on the usual Amazon, and I implore all of you to work hard, reconsider your lifestyles, take care of your immune system, and learn more and more about this technology, for this is the challenge of our time.
Well, Elana, thank you very much for that excellent presentation. I'm sure we'll speak more about some of these aspects when we go into Q&A later on. And now we would like to continue our discussion with Peter Kirby from San Rafael, California. He's a researcher, writer, and activist focused for the last 10 years on chemtrails and geoengineering. He's authored a book called Chemtrails Exposed, a New Manhattan Project, and he's a staff writer at activistpost.com. Peter, welcome to Deep Truth Visionaries Speak Out. We're most interested to hear the results of your research. Thank you for coming and presenting it.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. So let's just jump into the information here, because I only have a half hour and I'm trying to pack as much information in here as possible. We're going to do basically 2 topics today. The title of the presentation is Weather Modification, the CIA and the New Manhattan Project. So what we're going to be looking at is, firstly, why I call it a New Manhattan Project, particularly what I found in the evidence that compels me to give it this moniker. And then secondly, we're going to go into the CIA's involvement here. I have already compiled quite a bit of information that indicates the CIA's involvement here, and that was in stuff that I've published already. I'm sitting on a whole bunch of stuff that I haven't published already. I've just read maybe 20 books about the CIA, and for this presentation, I'm going to add some of that new information in to make it a more vital talk here. And this is what this is all leading to is a paper that I'm working on that I hope to have released by the end of the year. I'm going to call that one Chemtrails Exposed, the Deep State and the New Manhattan Project. And that's going to encompass a whole bunch of other groups that are probably involved here. And I might as well just go over those right now. The paper that I'm coming out with later this year is going to cover the Nazis, the Carnegie Institution, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Defense Intelligence Agency, the National Security Council, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the United Nations, the Bohemian Club, the Bush family, and other elite families. These are the groups that I have discerned through analyzing the evidence that are probably the ones responsible for this stuff. And I say probably because I don't want to get sued and I want to stay true to the information. So anyway, let's start with why I call it a New Manhattan Project. I didn't coin that term. I've just been popularizing it in connection with chemtrails and geoengineering because I found pretty early on in the research that, I put my money down on the idea that this was mainly a weather modification project. And I jumped into the historical research of the whole history of weather modification, specifically here in America. And I found tons of evidence for these chemtrails being part of a weather modification project. So once you realize that it's weather modification, then you can find all the connections to the scientists who worked on the original Manhattan Project and other things. Okay, what tells me that it's weather modification, for one, is that that's the only reason that any plane that I know of has ever sprayed stuff at that altitude. There's crop dusting, there's, spraying things out of helicopters to kill moths and mosquitoes and stuff, but that's all done at a lot lower altitudes. Anytime that there's a plane spraying at those high altitudes of like 35,000, 40,000 feet, I've never heard of any reason ever given other than weather modification. So that's one, why I think it's weather modification. Also, there's a whole bunch of documents speaking to a second generation weather modification program employing electromagnetic energy. And this is why it's not the standard weather modification stuff. They're not spraying silver iodide, which has been done since 1947, above board on the books and everything. If they were doing that, then they would just get the permit for it, and then we know about it and all this. This is all a matter of record. The conventional cloud seeding industry. What we're looking at today speaks to a second generation covert weather modification project, and this second generation, the distinguishing factor of it is the use of electromagnetic energy to control the weather. They don't do that in the conventional cloud seeding industry. So you find these documents, the most salient ones are Owning the Weather 2025. That was a whole set of documents. Owning the Weather was actually just one document in a whole set of many, and they state a program whereby they spray things out of planes and then hit the dispersed particles with electromagnetic energy in order to control the weather. They talk about that, I think it's 2 or 3 times in that whole set of documents, in different documents. And that's one of the most salient. And then the other most salient is the HARP patents. And there's one HARP patent in particular that talks about injecting particles into the atmosphere and then manipulating them with electromagnetic energy for the purpose of weather control. These are not documents that just fell off the back of a turnip truck, or somebody woke up in the morning. Somebody woke up in the morning and just thought, gee, I have a great idea. I'm going to write this down and put $5 and pay for a patent or whatever they did. These documents were the result of massive effort on the part of the military, mostly the military. For the Owning the Weather, it was the Air Force and the Navy's been heavily involved, and then the people working on HARP. It's almost military stuff. And then let's see here, we have plenty of motives as well for weather modification. I mean, the motives. There's financial markets. There's the catastrophe reinsurance market. There's the weather derivatives market. There's the snowpack from they shoot out a silver iodide on the side of mountains and make it run up the mountains, called orographic cloud seeding, and this creates snow, and it packs the reservoirs with water, with runoff, and that's worth billions of dollars. They've been doing that above board for a long time, and all the conditions that are created by the old conventional cloud seeding industry can be produced by the New Manhattan Project. And so all the old motives for the traditional cloud seeding industry apply to this New Manhattan Project. And so, yeah, I figured out that it's weather modification. And so once you know that it's weather modification, well, then you find all this history pertaining to the original Manhattan Project connected to later efforts in weather modification. We have many original Manhattan projects comparing the force of weather systems to that of atomic bombs. Teller was famous for this, but he wasn't the only one. Many original Manhattan Project scientists compared the force of weather systems to atomic bombs. It was quite a chic thing to be talking about at the time. And they were calling it planetary engineering, which is, of course, analogous to what David Keith and the rest of these bums are talking about, geoengineering. Anyway, it's not something that they just came up with. I mean, von Neumann was writing about it, and I think it was in 1952 or something. We'll get to that a little later. But many original Manhattan Project scientists went to do serious work in weather modification in the atmospheric sciences, such as Edward Teller, John von Neumann, Bernard Vonnegut. Bernard Vonnegut was a Manhattan Project scientist. If people are familiar with my work, they might not know that little tidbit. Irving Langmuir was a Manhattan Project scientist. He had Manhattan Project clearance for the Manhattan Project. They were Vonnegut and Langmuir were both working on gas mask penetrations of radioactive particles, and so Vonnegut and Langmuir went on to launch the scientific era of weather modification. If you're familiar with my work, there's lots and lots of information in there about how Langmuir, Vonnegut, and another guy named Schaefer launched the modern era of weather modification in 1947 with General Electric. And let's see who else. Ross Gunn is another famous scientist, Manhattan Project scientist, who went on to do work in weather modification, the atmospheric sciences. Donald Hornig, Vannevar Bush, the founder of the New Manhattan Project. I suggest you look up my paper, Truly a New Manhattan Project, to read all about him. Bill Nierenberg and others. These are all world famous scientists. A lot of people haven't heard of them, but if you know about science, you know those names that I just dropped are top shelf. And and then lastly, why I call it the New Manhattan Project. Let me see how I'm doing on time. I'm doing pretty good. In congressional testimony, while arguing for their cause, geoengineers referred to the original Manhattan Project 3 times in congressional testimony. Geoengineers making parallels to what they're doing to the original Manhattan Project. Here's Phil Rash. I'm going to read what he said in congressional testimony. Phil Rash is another one of these idiots like Keith who think it's a good idea to spray everybody with toxic garbage every day and saturate our atmosphere. And okay, I'll stop there. Here's what he said. In my opinion, before a nation or the world ever decided to deploy a full-scale geoengineering project to try to compensate for warming by greenhouse gases, it would require an enormous activity equivalent to that presently occurring within the modeling and assessment activities associated with the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change activity, or a Manhattan Project, or both. It would involve hundreds or thousands of scientists and engineers and require the involvement of politicians, ethicists, social scientists, and possibly the military. These issues are outside of my area of expertise. Early back of the envelope calculations estimated costs of a few $billions per year for full deployment of a stratospheric aerosol strategy. I mean, there it is. And that's what we got. I mean, this thing is freaking huge. It's so big that people can't believe it exists. It's just saturated our society. It's just been seamlessly woven into the fabric of our lives. And this has all been done under the cover of the theory of man-made global warming. This is how they've been propelling the project. This is how they've been getting people to be involved in the project. They say, oh, global warming is a big problem. You got to help, man. We got to do something desperate here. It's getting real bad. We're going to have to spray things from planes. And you know, of course, they're going to make $500,000 a year doing it. So they're like, yeah, I think global warming is a problem. We better do something about it. You know, there's a lot of money here. As the guy from MIT, who was the head of the meteorology department, I forget his name right now, said global warming is not about science. It's about politics and power, money, power, and politics. I can get the quote exactly. It's in my book, I think, or one of my works. But yeah, it's not about science. The theory of man-made global warming is not about science. So it's about control. It's about pushing this global weather modification project. Okay, let's see here. And then let's go into what these individual scientists from the new man. I'm going to have to start blazing through this stuff now. Edward Teller wrote and spoke of weather modification countless times, co-authored in 1996 series of papers from Lawrence Livermore National Labs, suggesting that we be sprayed with megatons of aluminum. John von Neumann, father of atmospheric computer modeling with others from the Princeton Institute for Advanced Studies, was the first to popularize both the theory of man-made global warming and SRM geoengineering. I don't have the date in front of me. I think that was, I think it was 52. It was 52 or 55. He wrote about it in Popular Science. I'm talking about the modern theory of man-made global warming. I gotta start going here. Luis Alvarez, original developer of remote control aircraft landing systems, which are part of, I'm asserting that the planes of the new Manhattan Project are drones. They are remotely piloted, and this guy was an original Manhattan Project scientist producing early systems such as this. Luis Alvarez's work later integrated with something called SAGE, which is probably the progenitor of today's new Manhattan Project air traffic control systems. It can control over 1,000 aircraft from a mobile facility. Vannevar Bush laid the foundation of the new Manhattan Project with the original Manhattan Project, the Rad Lab at MIT, the National Science Foundation, and the Office of Naval Research. Irving Langmuir invented the field of plasma physics, which is critical to the new Manhattan Project. That's what they're doing in the atmosphere. It's all about the plasma. Bernard Vonnegut, co-author of a 1958 paper appearing in the most cited weather modification report of all time, titled The Future, which outlined the new Manhattan Project. He did extensive space charge experimentation analogous to the new Manhattan Project, dispersing particles, hitting them with he was actually using electric energy at the time, but very similar. He had extensive involvement in weather modification. All right, got to get into the CIA here. CIA's involvement. We're just going to hit it hard. This is a teaser from my upcoming article, Chemtrails Exposed, the Deep State, the New Manhattan Project. I already mentioned who we're going to be covering in that. It's about a lot more than the CIA, but I think they are the main group here. They are probably the overall day-to-day manager of the project, with the MITRE Corporation handling the scientific aspects of it, but the CIA over everything with the cover, the media cover and all that stuff. And we're going to talk about what they're doing here. The church community. Okay, for anybody who says the CIA doesn't operate domestically, we figured that out a long time ago. It came out in the Church Committee hearings in 1974 that they operate domestically. Okay, so forget about that. The CIA was basically founded by bringing in Nazi scientists. That was basically how they started the organization with the OSS back in Europe, with the stay behind armies and Reinhard Gehlen, and all this. Alan Dulles worked with them. So you can stop wondering about where the Nazi scientists came from. They came from the CIA, okay? And they probably continue to come from the CIA. Okay, here's some new information. I'm looking at this one particular CIA member named Frank Wisner. He was very famous. He's in all these books and stuff, so it's not like I'm uncovering something that no one's ever talked about before, but he was a former OSS officer. That was the predecessor to the CIA. He was a former Wall Street lawyer, which doesn't help his credibility in my eyes. He was he also worked also another thing, another group that I'm looking at, which is the law firm of Sullivan and Cromwell, which is still around today. They have offices, I think, all over the world, but I think they're headquartered in New York, if I'm not mistaken. That was the Dulles brothers law firm, and they are heavily into the old boy network and promoting the old boy causes and the old boy agendas. They had General Electric as a client for many important things. I think they were the law firm that represented the American interests of the United Fruit Company, which is a famous thing, for CIA going around and ruining people's lives all over the world and wrecking countries. Sullivan and Cromwell, the law firm, looks interesting here. I better be very careful about what I say about them. I don't think they think twice about suing the pants off of me. Anyway, and then the previously mentioned John von Neumann, Manhattan Project scientist, he was a CIA advisor in 1952, as of 1952. And this is the guy who first wrote an article about the theory of man-made global warming that appeared in any type of popular magazine and any type of mainstream media. It was in Popular Science, like I mentioned. Anyway, he was a CIA advisor. And then William Raborn. When I talked about Raborn and his relation to this document, Restoring the Quality of Our Environment, in my previous James Corbett interview, I made a mistake. My bad. I said that the document Restoring the Quality of Our Environment came out after he was CIA director. Actually, it came out while he was CIA director in 1955. And this is important because How to Wreck the Environment was a document that stated the theory of man-made global warming and instructed everybody under the presidential office, executive office, which is the entire government, instructed them to, it gave them the green light to start doing things that could possibly mitigate this great threat to us, global warming. And so anyway, Raborn was instrumental in producing lots of technology that went into the new Manhattan Project, it appears, most notably the ionospheric heaters, which evolved from something called over-the-horizon radar. That's what he was basically working with at the time. But Raborn, he was instrumental in developing a lot of pertinent technology, specifically the electromagnetic energy portions of the new Manhattan Project. And he was head of the CIA when this document came out, talking about how global warming is a problem. And if I'm not mistaken, Gordon J.F. McDonald was a co-author on that, which leads us to the next thing. Gordon J.F., How to Wreck the Environment, McDonald, as I call him, worked on a satellite program for the CIA called Medea, and he was also the CIA's liaison to the Jason Group, which has worked extensively in weather modification. We also have the CIA involved here in the control of the media. I don't think I have to tell anybody about how the CIA has been involved in the media here. It's hard telling people who aren't familiar with this information, but we have quite a bit on them controlling the media here. Of course, Operation Mockingbird, the JFK assassination interventions, they were public about how they were trying to change people's minds about the JFK assassination, basically promoting the whole lone gunman theory and trying to discredit anybody who said anything different. They've been all over that angle. We got Carl Bernstein's 1977 Rolling Stone piece, which talks about CIA's involvement in the media. There was a German journalist called Udo Ulfkotte, and his book called Journalists for Hire, and which was in the process of being translated into English when he mysteriously died. And now the book just kind of like sits there on Amazon for, I think, $500 or something. Maybe we could try to translate it from German. I'm actually thinking about that seriously. But, Google Translate, it would be quite a job. But I saw him on a Russia Today interview. He just says, the CIA was just telling me that, hey, we have this article that we wrote. We want you to sign it, and then we're going to publish it. And he was like, no, I won't do that. He actually had integrity. And, I guess he had so much integrity that he just had to be eliminated. But, that's a matter of speculation. Anyway, CIA has been promoting the theory of man-made global warming and SRM geoengineering. They produced the 1974 document, A Study of Climatological Research as it Pertains to Intelligence Problems, which is the fount of modern global warming fear-mongering. In 2008, they produced a document titled National Intelligence Assessment on the National Security Implications of Global Climate Change to 2030, which was a standard climate change scarefest. In 2015, they funded a study which resulted in the publication of a document titled Climate Intervention, Reflecting Sunlight to Cool Earth, a document which suggests that we might be sprayed with megatons of toxic materials. And how could we forget Brennan's advocacy of late, where he came out and held a press conference where he wanted to tell us about his personal attention has been grabbed by SAI, the new term for spraying stuff out of planes and killing everything. And here's some new information. The CIA has been a leader in the production of over-the-horizon radar. This is over-the-horizon radar is the predecessor of today's ionospheric heaters, which are used to control the weather as part of the New Manhattan Project. I found that in the book called The CIA and the Cult of Intelligence, which came out in the mid-70s, Marchetti and Marx. It was a very important work. The CIA also has a history of maintaining and operating large covert airplane fleets. And these have been shown in the Flying Tigers, Civil Air Transport in America, Air America. I'm almost done. I got more new information right here. We have a possible alternate funding method other than congressional black budgets. I am asserting that there is a possibility that the global narcotics trade is funding the Chemtrails organization. Paul Williams, in his book Operation Gladio, The Unholy Alliance Between the Vatican, the CIA, and the Mafia, and Richard Cottrell in his book Gladio, NATO's Dagger at the Heart of Europe, show that what they were doing was running drugs, both heroin and cocaine, from locations all over the world, and they would use the Vatican Bank to launder the money. This has been proven in Paul Williams' book, Operation Gladio. And they would use the money that they got from running the global narcotics traffic to fund terrorism. They funded the Stay Behind Armies, the whole Gladio operation over in Europe, where they were just staging all these things and blaming them on the communists to try to solidify support for the capitalists. This was all funded by the global narcotics trade. So apparently how they do it is they launder the money through the Institute of Religious Works at the Vatican and then give it out through Swiss banks. So I could see that happening here. The NOAA or NASA or any of these groups, they have all kinds of off-the-books funding coming in from Swiss banks, and that's how it's funded. And of course, they have their regular budget from the American taxpayer, and the black budget, which probably helps as well. But this whole thing could definitely be funded by the global narcotics racket. And I find that very interesting. Okay, I'm done. My book is called Chemtrails Exposed, A New Manhattan Project. It's available on Amazon, and my website is peteracirby.com.
Well, excellent, Peter. Thank you so much for your presentation and for finishing right on time. I guess it's your technical background that allows you to do that. Thank you very much. I'm sure we'll have some very interesting questions for you during the Q&A. Now, Patrick is the next scheduled speaker. I did not see him ready. There you go. All right. We're going to talk now with Patrick Roddie, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Patrick. Stop Spraying Us, Exposing and Ending the Global Chemtrails Program is the title of his talk. Patrick runs StopSprayingUs.com. He presented his paper, Human Health Impacts of Proposed Geoengineering Solutions to the Paris Climate Conference. Boy, I wonder how that went. Hopefully we'll hear about that. And the Environmental Protection Agency and so forth. He's given speeches in several countries exposing the global crime of chemtrails, and he produces daily time-lapse videos of the skies over San Francisco, test rainwater for engineering metals and so forth. Patrick, thank you very much for your work, and welcome to Deep Truth Visionaries Speak Out.
Well, thanks for having me. So, hi, I'm Patrick. I run, like I said, StopSprayingUs.com. I'm a researcher, I'm an activist, and let's start off. Oh, my screen's gone black. Can anyone see me? Hello? Hello? Are you seeing me?
We can see you.
Okay, good. Yeah, because my screen went black. So, first of all,
perfectly, Patrick.
there's a lot of the shills.
Okay, good. Yeah, my screen went black. So,
I'm getting all kinds of other audio here. Okay, so anyway, there's a lot of disinformation about the spraying, and as awareness has grown, and it's actually well past the tipping point. What the shills are doing is trying to maintain the fiction that there still is a debate on whether we're being sprayed, and let's get that out of the way. First of all, if you can see this is the 14th of June 2013 journal Science, AAAS. It's the American Association for the Advancement of Science. And on page 1320, there's this article clarifying the dominant sources and mechanisms of cirrus cloud formation. Basically, they threw a plane up into so-called cirrus clouds to see what the condensation nuclei of these clouds were, and they found that it's mostly metals and minerals. Metallic oxides are minerals. They didn't find, but they found no biological matter. There's no pollen. They said sulfates were underrepresented, and carbon was pretty much absent. So it's not incomplete combustion. It is metals are being sprayed in our stratosphere, and this this is over several years. Secondly, there's a Professor Chris Exley in England. He found really high levels of aluminum in human brains, and a separate study found. Actually, I'll switch over to my little presentation thingy. Application window. Yeah, sorry. Technical. Yeah, switch into this. Okay, let's see if I can go to application window. Okay, right. So these are what count as clouds today. Aircraft condensation trails. These are the lines we see in the sky. These happen independent of humidity. They are not. If it's too dry, condensation cannot form. I mean, water will come out of the air when the air cannot hold anymore, and so a lot of days you'll have relative humidity at 7% in the skies like this. This character, David Keith, is he says this year he's going to release Elana over Tucson, Arizona. Elana is highly toxic. Aluminum is the most common abundant metal in the Earth's crust. It comes in the form of bauxite. Bauxite is extremely stable. Has been excluded from the biosphere for the existence of the Earth, really. But once it's refined and becomes alumina, is not entirely insoluble. The Al3+ cation will come off, and when a cell, a plant cell or an animal cell reaches a certain level of Al3+, it undergoes programmed cell death, apoptosis, and will kill itself. And this is the mechanism that you'll see in Alzheimer's. And here, this is if you go to PubMed and type in aluminum toxicity, you get like 5,000 articles. And this is the guy, Professor Chris Axie, who told me all about this stuff. And you should support his work. He gets private donations because some of the foundations will fund him because he's exposing the toxicity of aluminum. Alzheimer's has become the #1 cause of death in England 2 years running, and this is about heart attack, cancer, and stroke. That's not good, clearly. And here's a graph showing, it's number one, that top one is dementia and Alzheimer's. I wanted to find get like data showing when did the spraying start in earnest. I asked my Facebook friends, and I just asked them, when did you first notice it? So I got 360 comments and came up with this graph. On the left is in the 70s. There were 3 people said they first saw the trails then. In the 80s, it went to 10. And in the 90s, 51, a 5-fold increase. There was a huge jump in spraying in the 90s. So this, I dug through CDC statistics to find out how many people died in each year, of all causes. And here you have it. It goes on the left is 1979, on the right is up to 2016, and it goes from under 2 million to high twos. And if you look at the next graph is for cancer, and it's a similar sort of increase, a gradual increase. Next one is chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, which pretty much quadrupled 2-3 times over that same period, steadily, which would be strange because our air supposedly gotten cleaner because we got clean burning power stations, smoking's going down, Clean Air Act, all that stuff. Yet lung disease has become a massive killer. Parkinson's. So Parkinson's disease is a neurodegenerative disease. Aluminum causes, degeneration of all cells, but especially neurons, because neurons don't get replaced quickly. They like your skin cells will replace themselves, but neurons are long-lived. And if you look, so on the left is 1979, and when it gets to the early 90s, it starts going up a little faster, and the graph sharpens, goes more acute, in the early 2000s. Alzheimer's. This is the smoking gun, in my opinion. On the far left is 1979. The bottom is 0. At 1979, there were 850 deaths, and it increased steadily to about the early 90s, where it was still under 30,000 per year. and then it jumped, and there's this huge bulge. And if you look towards the right-hand side of the graph, it just shoots right up. It looks almost logarithmic. It's a giant increase in Alzheimer's. And and Chris actually has said on the record that if aluminum was not in the biosphere, if people were not exposed to aluminum, Alzheimer's would not occur in a normal human lifespan. It's a new disease. It like, as you can see, it just showed up, in the last 50 years. And it's a new disease, and it's the #1 cause of death. This is what the aluminum nanoparticles look like. Actually, I'm going to switch out of this, because if you can see me, wave if you can. I bought some. This is aluminum nanoparticles, 5 nanometer, and you can buy them from US Nano. But this is my cat. Hello. This is highly toxic. The material safety data sheet that came with it said that it causes cancer. I mean, when it's injected into animals, it causes tumors, and it also implicated in Alzheimer's. It's nasty, nasty stuff. We have to eliminate aluminum from our bodies, and actually a good way of doing it is drinking water that is rich in silicic acid. That's the silicon acid. Silicic acid only reacts with itself and aluminum. If you drink water it's high in silicic acid and have your urine tested afterwards, it is equal amounts of aluminum and silicon. That it gets processed out of your body. It's quite awesome. Anyway, I'll go back to screen share if it will let me. Wave if you can see. Yeah, go back to all right, so okay, so nasty stuff. Yeah, that's the material safety data sheet showing it causes tumors and all these other bad things. I do rainwater tests. Anytime it rains, I get the rain, send it off to NELAC certified lab, and this table shows my rainwater tests. I've done like 50 water tests. Aluminum showed up above method detection limits more than half the time. Barium 65% of the time. Iron 78. Titanium 80, well, almost 80%, and sulfur only tested 4 times.
Excuse me, Patrick, please move your slides forward. We're still seeing the one that has the picture of the crystals on it and the various pictures across the top.
I have moved forward, and it's
okay.
Is it not refreshing? You see anything?
We see a slide that says U.S. Research Nano Materials Inc.
For some reason, it's not really. That's weird. It says it's sharing.
Now we see an aircraft with its nose cone.
Okay, yeah, well, okay, right. So, okay, this, instead of going full screen, this might work better. And you can see it.
Now we're back to the U.S. Research Nano.
Okay, good. Yeah, all right, cool. All right, so that's all right. Well, yeah, this one, yeah. Sorry, this is the material safety data sheet. You can see that one, yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. It looks fine.
Okay, good. All right. So this is the thing that came with this toxic substance that I ordered from usnano.com. And by the way, I had to pay a $40 hazmat handling fee to get that shipped to me because it's so toxic. And this next one, and it also mentions it's implicated in Alzheimer's disease. This next one is my rainwater analysis. And all of these, if you go to stopsprayinghouse.com, you'll be able to download this PowerPoint and you'll be able to see all this stuff yourself. I have every single one of these rainwater tests, full PDFs, they're all there. So first one, these are about there's 49 rainwater tests. More than half the time, aluminum shows up ranging from below detection limits up to 540 micrograms per liter. Barium went from 1 to 160. Iron, 80% of the time ranging from 13 micrograms per liter to 400. Titanium, also about 80% of the time, a huge range on that. Iron is, oh, by the way, yeah, this shows that, like, this is a test where I had 160 micrograms per liter of barium, and aluminum and strontium didn't show. So because people will say, oh, you're contaminating your, rainwater test, sloppy handling, or whatever. I'm getting the metals vary independently of each other, so it's not consistent contamination. This is the plane that they used to fly around to collect the data for the science article. And that's the inlet when it comes in, and this is a mass spectrometry thing in here. And that's the article, which I'll have links to. There's more stuff on that. Oh, yes, actually, this is from the article, and it shows how this top graph is mineral dust, and this bottom one is this is minerals. The bottom one is metals. You'll see a spike here for aluminum. So that can be bauxite, alumina, or any other or salt of aluminum. But when you follow this line straight down into the metals level, the metal side, aluminum is not zero. There is elemental aluminum in the stratosphere. It's unreacted. Aluminum, the metal, is highly reactive. It will bind to stuff. If you have an iPhone and you scratch it, it will oxidize. And all of these metals, sodium, potassium, iron, copper, all these things, they are floating around in the stratosphere unreacted. Iron, for example, if you leave iron out, expose it to air and water, it will rust. So there's something very off about that. So they are actually spraying metal in the stratosphere. This next paper, this is from David Keith. He's the one who said, "Oh yeah, we might have to spray stuff in the sky." But he said that mostly they talk about sulfates. He said that sulfates aren't that effective because they stick together and fall out of the sky. Instead, you have to use these little engineered particles like aluminum, and this is one of his proposals. And this is a little flying disk. The top layer is alumina, Al2O3, aluminum metal, barium titanate, and at the bottom, Fe3O4 magnetite. That's an oxide of iron. And here is a paper that was published in 2016 that showed that human brains all over the world are saturated with tiny nanospheres of magnetite. And this is what they look like. And these things are tiny. That's like 10 nanometers. A nanometer is a billionth of a meter. And they said in the paper, oh yeah, this was formed from combustion. And that's complete hogwash, because to create a droplet, you have to condense a gas. You can't just, if you heat something up and melt it, it's not going to go into perfectly spherical things. And iron, the boiling point of iron is close to 6,000 degrees. There's no carbon fuel that can reach that temperature, even under ideal conditions. Like 2,000-3,000 degrees is maybe the highest temperature you're going to reach with even, any sort of carbon thing. And these things are everywhere. And iron is an oxidant. And alumina is a pro-oxidant. if you put the two of them together, alumina amplifies the oxidative stress on cells by a factor of 10. So Alzheimer's will work 10 times faster when it's in the presence of iron, and it's in all of our brains. And this is the same place that I got the alumina particles. I also got the magnetite particles. And the other issue with iron is that it's affected by magnetic waves and electromagnetic waves, and this is what happens when you I don't know. Here, if you put a fork in a microwave, can you see that? This is this is putting wire wool in a microwave. It's not a good thing. And if our bodies, every cell in our body has like magnetic particles, and then we get hit by this electromagnetic stuff, all this 5G stuff, it's really, really bad. Where are we? And this this final slide is this is a rainwater analysis of water that I get from Mount Shasta. It actually comes straight out of the mountain, and it has 27,000 micrograms per liter of silicon, which is fantastic. That protects you from aluminum. But anyway, that's a quick run through. And can you see me again? Anyone there? Hello?
Okay, yes, we can see you quite well. And
so that's the basic proof that's going on. And now, what do we do about it? Well, okay, first of all, for people who are new to this, they find it really hard to believe that people would do something so awful. Actually hurting people. It makes no sense, because by default we want people to do better. I consider it puppies and ice cream, but no matter how inconceivable it is to you, you have to understand yourself and see how you're motivated, and imagine what you would be like if your intentions were the opposite. And that's what the other side are doing. We create, they destroy, they harm, we heal, they lie, we tell the truth, and so on. It's just there's a spectrum from awesomeness to not awesomeness. They're on the not awesome side, and we have to if there's a problem, like if I have a squeaky hinge, I'll put oil on it, I'll fix it. There's something that's not right, you take care of it. You have to be able to discern, see what is around you, know things, don't think things, know things. There's a big difference between knowing and thinking. And on the basis of what you know, then you make a decision on what to do, how to improve things, and then take action. This is what adults do. And this is a spiritual war, and it is good against evil. And yes, you can be judgmental and say, evil sucks, I don't want it. And the other side are trying to limit what we say, because if you limit what you say, that limits what you can think, and then ultimately what you can do. They don't limit themselves at all, and neither should we. We are in combat. And actually, going back to David Keith, one of the things that I'm doing in combat is he says he's going to release up to 1 kilogram of alumina particles over Tucson this year. It might get pushed into next year, but he says it could happen as soon as this year. Those 5 nanometer particles, those nanoparticles, I calculated how many you'd get in a kilogram, and then divided that giant number by the population of the planet, and it comes out to 500 billion alumina particles per person, man, woman, and child in the world. So Alzheimer's is a progressive disease. When you reach a certain level of aluminum load, a cell will die, and ultimately you'll either you'll get a diagnosis or a death from Alzheimer's. And the older you get, is if you don't get hit by a bus or fall down a mine shaft or something, the actuarial tables show that it's almost a statistical certainty that you will die of Alzheimer's. So if I was to die of Alzheimer's at some time in the future, David Keith will, if I breathe in one of the 500 billion particles that are assigned to me, my life will be shortened by maybe not much, but it will be shortened. And there's a word for that, and it's murder, and it's defined in Black's Law Dictionary. 8th edition as murder, the killing of a human being with malice aforethought. Well, he knows it's going to kill people. He's doing it anyway. That's malice aforethought. When you go down to first-degree murder, it defines it as murder that is willful, deliberate, or premeditated. Check, check, check. Or that is committed during the course of another dangerous felony. All murder perpetrated by poisoning or by lying in wait is considered first-degree murder. So he's trying to murder me and everyone else on the planet. And that means I have standing legally. I can sue him in federal court. I'm going to go to San Francisco 9th Circuit here, San Francisco, and get the first a restraining order against him so that he can't release any of this stuff, and then a preventive injunction saying he can't release aluminum or any aluminum salt other than bauxite, because of that is murder. And I will sue him for $1 or $4 and establish liability for alumina. And if he questions it, I'm going to fly Chris Exley out, and he'll go on the stand, and it will destroy the aluminum industry. It's going to be so much worse than asbestos. And then I'll let them know that if they release any of this stuff, they are going to be liable for their percentage of every single future case of Alzheimer's in perpetuity. And it's not just him and his team. He's doing it out of Harvard. So the Harvard endowment is exposed. He's also funded by the Bill Gates Foundation. So the Bill Gates Foundation, the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, Hewlett-Packard Foundation, a bunch of other so-called philanthropists. I'm going to tell class action lawyers, once I establish liability, I'll invite them to pick themselves a protected group, like the Navajo or the Spotted Owl or something, and then take these guys to the cleaners, and it will destroy them. And they started it, and I'm not fighting with, swords and shields and hate and fear and deception and stuff. I'm telling them exactly what's going to happen if they do this, and letting them know it's going to be a lot better if you don't. If once they do, if they cause harm by releasing this stuff, and this is the first time they're actually saying they're openly going to do it. Because before it's always, we're thinking about doing it in the future, and no one has admitted this is completely covert. But this is our opportunity to stop it dead in its tracks. And then after we, get liability for this particular group, here's the thing. So if I'm a medical device manufacturer and I produce a faulty medical device, and I'm one of several companies who are doing it, if there is a legal action against the makers of this faulty medical device, I have 5% of the market share. I am liable for 5% of the damages. So you look at the global cost of all Alzheimer's deaths in perpetuity, figure out what that number is, and find out what percentage 1 kilogram of alumina is of the total that is released. And they're going to be responsible for that, and then we go after all the other companies, and then ultimately after Alcoa. It'd be good to get aluminum out of the biosphere completely, And that's what we're going to do. I'm also extracting mortality data from the city of San Francisco. I'll be getting causes of death going back to late 90s. I have these time lapses. I'm going to find out how many more people die on heavy spray days and what they die of. And then all those guys are going to have standing as well. So we fight them with the truth. You fight because it's the right thing to do. You don't fight them because you want to be, internet famous or rich or whatever. You just do it because it's like, it's the thing to do.
Yep.
How am I doing for time? Oh, yeah, so half an hour. Yay.
Yeah, the thing to do is to thank you for your very, very interesting presentation. I'm sure there's some questions that we'll have for you and the other speakers when we get to the Q&A at the end. But thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation and for your activism. I wish you Godspeed and good luck in the courts. It sounds like you're assuming that it's all about justice, but I don't know.
The thing is, I'll finish off here. Like I had an epiphany because I'm in the scientist. I need to know things. I have to figure out if something is really real. And that's how I've worked all my life. In 2016, I had an epiphany, and I found out this whole spirit God thing is real. I have their help. When you work for the puppies and ice cream team, you get help from the epitome of puppies and ice cream. And like when I go into court, I've got the freaking Holy Spirit on my side. So I wouldn't want to be going up against me. You get protected.
I wouldn't either. We are up against the clock, though, so we're going to go to the next speaker. But the last thing I'll say, you just inspired me, Patrick, is that I found in my life, the truth is not like a person. When it's being attacked or being raped, nobody can see it, but it's very, very important. And those who stand up to defend the truth under these circumstances, especially when you put yourself in peril one way or another, the universe smiles upon that, and you'll see magical things. Okay, well, thank you very much. Yeah. Let's go on now to our next and final speaker. Unfortunately, Kevin Modis is not going to be with us today. He had a problem. Some people notified him apparently that this Deep Truth conference or seminar online had something to do with the anti-Semitism, which it does not. And so for that reason, he backed out. So our next and final speaker of this panel will be Jerry Day, who is going to speak on smart meter Trojan horses, 24/7 surveillance, radiation sickness, and other in-home dangers. Jerry is an award-winning, Emmy-winning television and media producer, and he's got some fantastic resources for us, websites, freedomtaker.com and emfhelpcenter.com. And we're going to hear from Jerry now about smart meters. He lives off the grid, and that makes it fine in my book anyway. Are you there, Jerry?
I'm here. Can you see me, though? I don't have my camera right now.
I do not see you. I see. Your camera's not working, but you're going to go and do it just audio only?
Well, we had the camera working a little bit ago, and somehow it has disappeared.
Well, I won't say you have a face for radio, but you certainly have a voice for one. So I'm sure it'll be very informative nevertheless. Sure. Friends, Jerry Day.
Hi, folks. I'm ready to go, and I'm obviously we're going to have to do a little bit of improvisation here because we have some technical issues. I'd like to start talking about referring to something Elana Freeman said. We have government kind of looking into everything we're doing. She talked about General Petraeus and how he was so delighted that we will now and in the future have these billions and billions of Internet of Things devices informing constantly the NSA and all of his security agencies and all of the spies that we pay with our tax dollars to spy on us to collect an unbelievable gamut of information about every individual through their personal devices, through all kinds of data gathering information. 5G is the topic we're going to deal with, and 5G is more information for government. That is the purpose of it. That I have been involved, very active for 5 or 8 years, somewhere in there, with electronic metering, utility metering, what we call smart meters. The correct term is electronic utility metering. These are surveillance devices. What is inside an electronic utility meter is a surveillance device. The surveillance device has to be powered by something, so they steal a little electricity from you to power their surveillance device in your utility meter. And there should not be any electronics in a utility meter because utility meters are subject to periodic high voltage surges, such as 20,000 to 60,000 volts is not uncommon. These surges come in anywhere from 0 to 20 times a year. So you might have a weather incident, you might have a line maintenance problem, you might have a accident where something, a tree falls over, something hits a power line. Now you've got a 60,000 volt surge on your line. That surge comes into your electronic utility meter, which has fine electronics in it, and the fine electronics cannot withstand that surge. And the fine electronics, the little surveillance device, should not be in that position. Because it is stealing electricity from you, it is in line, it is in the circuit, and therefore it cannot be isolated from the 60,000 volt surge. And therefore, when the 60,000 volt surge comes into the line, that little surveillance device explodes in flames. And this is characteristic of every electronic meter. They talk about different meters. They'll try to confuse you by saying, oh, this is an AMI meter, this is an AMR meter, this is another kind of meter. They're all digital meters. They all contain electronic devices that none of them have surge protectors. Now, when you go back to the electromechanical electronic meters, or electrical meters, they're called electromechanical meters, the old kind that your grandmother had, and most of us had when we were children. These devices, every one of them had a surge protector. And that was one of the two main functions. You might say there's three functions of the old style meter. One is to give you a gross meter reading of your monthly usage. The other is to ground and provide safety in the case of a surge. And then the surge protector is kind of the third function that allows that to happen properly. And so in the new meters, the electronic meters, we have an additional function, which is to conduct high resolution surveillance on the personal activities of the residents of the home. And there is no question that they're doing this, and they can do this. And if we had our visuals and our graphics, I would have that for you, where there's a chart I have which demonstrates with the current draw profile the data that is produced by the surveillance surveillance device in your utility meter. There are spikes on the chart that can be clearly identified, not only to the device being used, like a bathroom heater or a kettle or a hairdryer. They can identify the device being used. They can actually identify the make and model number, and they can actually identify the condition of the device, so that some utility companies are even offering people little insurance policy contracts where you will be conveniently informed 90 days before your air conditioner fails. And the way they do that is to examine the current draw profile of your air conditioner and to look at its performance, and they can tell if there are bearings out or motor problems or this or that just by looking at your current draw profile. So they have extremely high resolution data on your personal activities and your equipment and your devices inside your home. I like to say it's worse than having a camera on you in your home, because a camera can only see one area at a time. This is everything going on in your house at all times, time of day recording and database creation. That database goes immediately into the hands of total strangers who can exploit that, and who admit now that they do exploit that in many ways. Some of the ways are commercial, some of the ways are associated with government and law enforcement and security agencies. So you are absolutely and totally exposed. Your usage patterns, your behavior in your home, how many people reside there, when they are not there, what they're using when they're there, how much they use it. And I have an example that, if people don't think this is dangerous, here's how this works. Take a single woman who is living with her 2 small children and who is a member of PTA clubs and parent groups, and she goes out several times a week to involve herself with these community groups and quite often takes her children and whatever. The power company is doing current draw profile on her. They are watching what she does in her home, and she is using her hairdryer 4 times a week on average. The algorithms that have been created for this system are designed to speculate on what this young woman's hairdryer usage might mean. And the algorithms actually project a speculative meaning of what this hairdryer usage means. And so when this young woman uses her hairdryer 4 times a week to go out to her public meetings, the algorithm says she is using her hairdryer 4 times a week. That means she's going out to parties and bars. That means she is a drinker and possibly a drug user. That means she is abusing and neglecting her children. And very shortly, you have a knock on the door from a possibly armed team of Child Protective Services agents who are going to exploit this data. And if they find any evidence whatsoever in that home of drinking or drugs or what they might consider would be associated with drinking or drugs, they will take the children from the home on the basis of this evidence. And this evidence is being used in this way already. The Ohio State, for instance, has been regularly invading homes that they suspect to have marijuana grow houses or whatever, based on current draw profile. And the current draw profile can be completely misleading. So there are armed people coming into your home as a result of what your smart meter is telling them you might be doing. Now, in the case of SWAT teams, I'm going to go over a little information. This is from an article in the Daily Bell. Just recently, the headline of the article is called David Hogg. David Hogg is this activist who was at one of the school shootings and survived one of the school shootings and became a young activist against gun ownership. And the article is David Hogg just got swatted, and here's why that's so messed up. That's the article title. What it means when David Hogg got swatted, somebody called in a prank call and managed to motivate a SWAT team to come and raid his house and kick in his door. And they're all downplaying this like this was just a prank and, oh, this is nothing. Yeah, a prank. You try calling a SWAT team on someone and getting them to kick in the door and see how they consider that to be a prank. The police have given this a pass because they kicked in the door of David Hogg, who is one of their favorite anti-gun advocates at the current time. And so this is all played down. But the article says that in the 1970s, when SWAT teams were created, there were generally a few hundred SWAT teams or SWAT actions per year nationally. It was understood that SWAT was only to be called in extreme situations involving hostages, terrorists, major violent crimes. But as police forces in every community have been militarized, and the number of SWAT teams exploded in every city. In the year 2005 alone, there were 50,000 SWAT raids on minor offenses, such as drug possession, domestic disputes, victimless offenses. SWAT teams, 50,000 times crashing indoors over those incidents. Many of those SWAT raids were conducted at the wrong address. And during many of those instances, police killed innocent people. The Wall Street Journal reported that in recent years, 50 have been killed by SWAT when they were acting on reports of nonviolent and victimless crimes. So we have gone full police state. We have groups of armed mercenaries crashing forcibly into homes. Now it gets worse. What used to be a routine call for police assistance now brings a battalion of heavily armed mercenaries on high alert with hair trigger mentality, provoking and terrorizing whoever they encounter and causing unnecessary and inexcusable mayhem. This is not community service. These are execution squads. In order to catch people in the act, or preserve evidence, SWAT teams normally conduct what is called no-knock raids, where police do not announce themselves or identify themselves at all. This means you have no idea why your door is being smashed in. You are likely to take some defensive or evasive action, and if you do, you are shot and killed without hesitation. After murdering some innocent bystander, SWAT officers are rarely investigated or prosecuted, and almost never convicted of any wrongdoing or even disciplined. They never pay for the damage they do to people's homes, even when they raid the wrong address. But people are routinely prosecuted for simply defending themselves against these unannounced, armed, and violent intruders. The victims of these raids who try to defend themselves are often themselves charged with ridiculous, fabricated allegations like interfering with police work. And judges seem to favor the police in any legal dispute, no matter how outrageous, irrational, or unlawful the police conduct may be. Judges seem to think that communities need more and more police terror, as nowadays judges deny less than 3% of police requests for SWAT raid no-knock warrants. So they're approving 97%, almost rubber stamping all of these no-knock warrants where people are getting killed and innocent people are getting terrorized, where SWAT teams are going to wrong addresses, all of them, just 97%. Oh, sure, go give that a try. No matter how minor the charges, if police simply say there may be a gun in the house, for instance, they get their warrant for a full armed assault. On these deadly raids, on average, no contraband or evidence is found more than half the time. So these are really inexcusable raids. Wrong address raids are common because of police and judicial impulse to get the jump on the alleged perpetrators and their failure to verify the rumors and suspicions on which they're acting. So they have very scant evidence. They want to jump on it. So here's your warrant. Go bash in a door. Go shoot somebody. With no one being held accountable, there is no deterrent of any kind for excess force, inappropriate enforcement, or any amount of unintended collateral damage. Nothing. Our communities are wide open, fair game for any destruction and death that any SWAT team or officer chooses to commit. We have no defense against this. It is our Justice Department that is doing this to us. It is the agencies that are designed and intended to protect us that are committing these heinous raids and assaults. There is evidence that collateral damage is committed intentionally by police who have been trained to think that by showing force, they are making their communities safer. They feel they are preventing crime by committing crimes. Obviously, there's a terrible need for some law enforcement psychological deprogramming. Your local police policies are overseen by your local officials. Police policy is supposed to be strictly controlled by city officials and county supervisors, but police departments often develop an authority all unto themselves by disregarding or intimidating those elected officials. It is very important to know that we we must attend our city and county government public meetings. We must let them know what we think about the recent militarization of our community servants. And we need to insist that police protect and serve, and only protect and serve. These are the officials, the city council members, the county supervisors who oversee our sheriffs and our police, and who are supposed to be acting as administrators and formulating policy, which they will then pass down to the police departments. But now I know, because I've been in cities that have this problem, the authority channels have been reversed. And the police departments tell the city council members what they're going to do. And they tell the city council members to sell it to the community. So we have to go to our city council members and make it very clear that they will not be serving a second term if they do not put some hard controls and limitations on police conduct. Now I'm going to go on to 5G I believe there was a question about just some of the technical aspects of that. 5G is higher bandwidth. The idea is we can watch more videos. We can have more stuff come to us on the internet. Well,
Jerry,
yes.
sorry to interrupt, but your slides are working. If you give me the slide numbers, I can play them. They're on the screen now.
Oh, good. Okay, I'm gonna go. And you're still not getting my camera?
We have no camera, but we have your slides.
Okay, I don't have. I'm looking for your. I'm sorry. I'm looking for your. I don't have your feed right now at all. So I'm trying to figure out how to get.
You just point down on the bottom.
There we are. Okay, now, here we go. I got it. Now I can see something. Okay, thank you. All right. So I'm just going to tell. I don't know the numbers. I can only see what you're showing me. So I'm just going to say keep flipping, and we're going to have to flip by a few of these. There, as I said, that we've had some. Yeah. So this is how you identify your meter. If you notice on every one of these meters, there is a clock face, kind of a clock radio type display. Obviously on the electromechanical meters, you have the dionical devices. So there are people who are, still asking, how do I tell if I have a smart meter? Any of these kind of digital displays, you have a smart meter. Go ahead and flip along. New slide. There we are. Now here we are. I was talking about this earlier. You see in the top of this device, there's all these fine electronics. Now, this photograph is extremely telling. Look down in the bottom base. That base unit of that smart meter has some, I would say, 1/4-inch diameter copper rods. These are intended for surge protection. And of course, they will do their job. Unfortunately, look how close when this thing is assembled and those circuits come in to that device. Look how close those fine electronics will be to that voltage going through that 1/4-inch copper rod. That's probably going to be heating up. Even if it weren't that close, as I said, the fine electronics in the top of that are tied into the circuit of the electricity that will be passing through that copper rod. So if you need a 1/4-inch diameter copper rod to deal with the voltage, what is going to happen to those fine electronics, those little transistors and gadgets in the top? This is a bomb. This is a hand grenade. This is a time bomb on the side of your house. There have been tens of thousands of fires caused by these. In Stockton, California, we're going to get to this image, I think, later in the slides. In Stockton, California, in one day, a guy drove a truck into a power pole and blew up 5,000 of these. Okay, go ahead and move the next slide. So here we are. This is what we're talking about. This is what smart meters do. You can see on these images, you have these clock face digital displays. You don't see any electromechanical meters having caused these fires. Go ahead and next slide. More of the same, just absolutely burned, melted, toasted, exploded houses completely immolated in many examples. Go ahead to the next slide. This man in the middle, the African-American gentleman in that house, died from his smart meter fire. These are serious fires. You can see from the ones on the top row. These do major damage. Go ahead and continue. This is what continue on. We got some missing images. Just keep going. Here we go. So here's the Stockton article on CBS talking about smart meters explode after truck causes power surge. There were 5,000 meters in an instant that were destroyed in Stockton, California. And you can see one behind that lady on the wall that just blew off the wall and hanging there by a wire. This is what we are facing with electronic utility metering. Next slide. Here we go. Yeah, same article, Stockton, California. Next slide. Keep going. Keep going there. Okay. So this is what I generally open my talk with. I don't know how we went back to the first slide. Okay. All right. Now this one is a very interesting graph. You can see that at the bottom it goes to 2009. That's 9 years ago. So at the very on the left column, it's telling you that and this is for England. They did this in London, I believe. But it's the same for any urban environment. Our background levels of radiation if they were to rise into the red area on this chart, would be in an unhealthful zone. And by 2009, they were well solidly into the unhealthful zone, which you can see in the upper left is 1.5 volts per meter of electric fields and 6,000 milliwatts per square meter of electromagnetic radiation, radio frequencies mostly. And now if you'll go to the next slide, we're being cooked. Okay, if you can see that same graph at the bottom with a simply, not a curve, but just a straight line extrapolating into, I believe, about 2015. This is where our exposures are going. They're already in the highly toxic range at the bottom, where the red part of that chart is. So follow that line, and that's where you are. We have more and more wireless devices, more and more government use of wireless systems around us, more and more cell towers. Now, just to have the statistic, we currently have, I've seen reports where there are currently 150,000 or so, 154,000 cell towers in the United States. I think there are far more now. But the idea with 5G and the Internet of Things and this whole new technology is that 154,000 cell transmitters in our environment will go to 800,000 cell transmitters in our environment, probably many more. So we are multiplying continually our electromagnetic exposures, and we are now in trillions of times the base level. We are being exposed to this. If this is biologically harmful at all in any way, we are in major trouble, because this is electromagnetic fields being transmitted that cannot be avoided by most people. Go ahead and go to the next slide there. Dr. Martin Blank. Now I'm getting a big crop on this. There's a picture of Dr. Martin Blank that is missing here, but I'm not seeing the lettering on the left. Is that just me? But Dr. Martin Blank is a good name to remember. He is one of the world's leading researchers in the bioeffects of electromagnetic fields. And he says that smart meters and radio frequency transmitting devices are cancer causers. There's no doubt. And they cause cancer not just in ionized assaults, you might say ionized exposures, but also in non-ionizing exposures. And for those who don't know what that means that the FCC's standards say that EMF only hurts you if it heats you up, if it literally makes you burn, your tissues burn. Dr. Martin Blank has found that non-ionizing radiation that does not have a thermal effect, is just as cancer causing. And this is the type of electromagnetic fields that the FCC says has no effect on you at all. Their data is from the 1970s. They do not want to update it because they're in bed with the wireless industry, and they're trying to make it all sound happy and fun. And they are telling you that the non-ionizing radiation emitted by your cordless phone or your smart meter or your wireless devices will not hurt you. Absolutely wrong. The evidence and science clearly shows non-ionizing radiation is a cancer causer, is a DNA deconstructor. And there's an important point to know about DNA, and people don't understand DNA quite commonly. DNA, we think, is a coded molecule that we carry in our bodies to pass on to our children so they will know how to look like us. That is not exactly the whole story. DNA is how you look like you. If you didn't have your DNA constantly working, constantly acting as a machine to create and recreate your body, it would be a very short amount of time where you would basically disintegrate and look nothing like what you look like. DNA is a constantly working machine. Every moment of the day, they say that in 7 years, all of your body cells are fully replaced. That's actually sort of the outside end of that. There are parts of your body that are replaced almost every day. Your retina, the sensors in your eyeball are replaced every 48 hours, and they have to be or they won't work. And so your DNA is constantly saying, give me a new eyeball, give me a new eyeball, give me a new eyeball. Okay, when you have electromagnetic fields around you, you are getting that DNA being damaged, being crippled, being torn apart by those electromagnetic frequencies. This is very serious stuff. Go ahead and go to the next slide.
Jerry, with an eyeball on the clock.
Yeah.
We're heading to we're pretty much at the end of your allotted time. So if you could wrap this up now, then I would like to speak with you a little bit about 5G.
Absolutely. Just flip through a couple of slides. Let's see if there's any particular wrap up. I'm sorry that these are seem to be cropped on my screen. Just keep going. Okay, so going into the surveillance area, I think I've covered kind of a good basic amount of that, and so we could go on. But now let's end with this guy, Miles Keogh. I think the data is going to be worth, now this is the data they're collecting from their smart meters. This is a guy who represents, if you look at his credentials there at the bottom, he represents National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners. So he's at the top end of the industry of utility companies representing the commissioners who regulate them. And he says, this is a great thing. The data we collect from your personal data spying on you in your home is going to be worth a lot more than the commodity that's being consumed to generate the data. In other words, they have a $2 billion a year plus revenue from giving you electricity. They're going to have far more money coming from the data they're stealing from you, from your living habits and your personal activities inside your home, because that data can be used to prosecute you, can be used to tax you, can be used to exploit you commercially. And so that data is worth more. Imagine that, more than all the electricity they're generating and sending to homes over all these grids. So that should tell people that this data is going to be a very big factor in their lives, and it will not be in their favor. Let's call that a wrap.
Spoken like a true pro in both terminology and in your excellent speaking voice, Jerry, and your presentation.
Thank you.
A bit of housekeeping for a moment. I hate to do this over the air, folks, but it's a bit confusing with the emails back and forth. This panel was originally scheduled to go to 1:30 New York time. It is already 1 o'clock New York time, and we would like to squeeze in an extra 15 minutes for a discussion on 5G. Is it the consensus of the producers that we shall go to 1:45 instead of 1:30? And that will give us a 45-minute break between this segment and this panel and the next. Can somebody verify, please?
Sure, fine with me.
Okay, fine with me too. But hello.
Fine with me. Fine
All
with
right,
me.
all right, that's great. All right, so we've cleared that up. All right, so what we're going to do, Jerry, if you don't mind, I'd like to discuss with you a little bit about 5G. We did have a presenter who, was persuaded to not come because of discussions about Zionism and other panels here. So I understand you're familiar with it, and then we're going to go to a general Q&A with the rest of the panelists.
Very good.
So then, I'm kind of like the man from Mars here on 5G. I've heard about it. I hear it's supposed to be coming. And based on what you've said and others, am I right in assuming that this is a jacked up version of the kind of wireless technology that we're all using right now to give us, so it can sell more data bandwidth to us in movies and that sort of thing?
Oh, excuse me. Am I
ostensibly
still invited to be in on the discussion or not?
Yes, I'm going to start with Jerry, though, since he's just finished.
Okay.
All right. Very good.
All right. Very, very quickly, 5G is a whole new ballgame. The idea that it's going to give you more movies to watch is a selling point. It's got nothing to do with why they want to go to 5G. 5G is much, much higher bandwidth, higher frequency, the millimeter wave frequency, and the amount of data that will be able to process will be magnitudes greater. And so, yes, of course, that will allow you to watch your movies on a larger screen or whatever you want to do. The consumer benefit is not the purpose of 5G. The purpose of 5G is to collect Internet of Things data, mass data that is far more than they can collect now on a very, very high acuity time of day basis, so that they can track and control the the population. This is what the electronic metering has been from the beginning. It is a surveillance program. Surveillance devices have no business being in a utility meter. This is a way to spy on people in their homes through all their devices. The Internet of Things will mean that you'll have all kinds of crazy sensors everywhere, your thermostat, your this, your that, all over the house, all your appliances filled with them. And this mass amount of data that gives an amazingly high resolution showing of what your behaviors are and what your preferences are and what your violations are and what your political opinions are. All of these things are going to be easily accessible in security agency databases because of collecting this 5G data. As Elana Freeman said, and as General Petraeus said, this is a way we can spy on you through your dishwasher, and we don't have to go implant spying devices anymore. Everybody will buy them and pay for them themselves and have them running in their houses. And this is the plan. It is high-level surveillance like the world has never seen.
And that's the surveillance part of it. Elana, I suspect there are also health effects as well at those frequencies. Could you speak with us about that?
Yes, I wanted to bring in something I wrote in Chapter 8 of the Under an Ionized Sky. It's really bizarre to me, but the 5G cell phones operate in the 28 to 100 gigahertz range, the same frequency as the extremely high frequency millimeter wave spectrum used in Raytheon's active denial system, the ADS, which is a directed energy weapon for perimeter security and crowd control. Now, when I think of that, I think also of the capability of 5G to move in rays. It can be directed, and so I think it is absolutely surveillance. And I think it might be much more of a crowd control as well, being able to target various houses through the IoT in the house and the 60 hertz that's in the walls. So that's of very great concern to me, just on a level of population control. And the other thing regarding the health, I really have to quote neurosurgeon Dr. Jack Kruse. He talked about the mitochondria, and this is a key. The mitochondria, most people don't know, are tiny structures containing genes that float around inside the cell, away from the cell's nucleus, where the vast majority of the genes reside. There can be as many as 100,000 mitochondria floating in the cell cytoplasm. So Jack Kruse says, 5G is coming and your mitochondria will be fully assaulted when it arrives. The key part is to understand that because of the types of light used and the frequency modulation required to increase the bandwidth, 5G is more likely to jump conduct and induce currents on many things like power lines, gas lines, water pipes, underground utilities that come right into your house and induce deadly magnetic fields. Many U.S. cities are already facing this risk, and the proof that it is happening can be found in hospital data, where we're seeing epidemiological evidence that certain zip codes are getting more mitochondrial diseases and dysfunction, autoimmune diseases, sepsis, and unusual diseases with no real history that seem to come out of the blue, because the nanometer EMF massively raises the heteroplasmy rates in a short period to cause the disease, because it ruins calcium control of the voltage-gated channels in cell membranes because of the 5G frequency changes. This changes the charge in the surface of the cells and then changes the charge inside the cell. This mechanism will touch all corners of the globe and not only our country. The FCC requires no testing of the health effects because of the 1996 Telecommunications Act, in which the AI artificial intelligence with 5G over satellite to power the IoT. Because what good is big data and artificial intelligence if it can't be shared with things in real time? So mark my words, this disruption of proton recycling will require a major hack, and that mechanism is of paramount importance. Okay, that's it.
And this is all not to mention what I call the speed dialing effect. I'm of the opinion that, I'm going to be 65 years old this year. I've come a ways. I've seen what things were like back in the old days. And in my opinion, there's been a big infantilization project going on. I mean, people, there's television commercials showing young men who don't know how to change a tire now. That used to be a rite of passage when I was a young man, but it seems like the more and more these devices in our homes are controlled, and you talk to them and you think about them, and they do this and they do that. It's like the nanny state Big Brother getting right inside your house, and people losing basic skills and communication and how to survive. I mean, it seems like people will be entirely dependent now on the network. Power failures or hacking, or if they just don't like you anymore, you could just be dropped off the grid. Is that a valid concern, speakers?
If I could address how that's going to work, it isn't just that it's all around us. It's that because of the chemical trails and the GMO supplementary system, the vaccination programs, we have these metals in us that are highly conductive. And now we are turning our own bodies. We've always been like towers, like transceivers anyway, because we are resonant beings. We cyclotronically resonate with whatever is around us, whatever the frequency is being pulsed. So now we have this whole antenna system. Our DNA itself is an antenna. So we have the metals inside of us, and we are now plugged in. I mean, we couldn't be more plugged in if we stuck our 2 fingers in the light socket. So this is what people are going to have to really understand. It isn't just that you're carrying around an iPhone that is pulsing you with all sorts of subliminals and frequencies. I don't know what's going on there because I don't own a cell phone. I refuse to own one. But I know people need to understand that this wireless world means we are plugged in, and that's partially what I mean by the space fence lockdown. Absolutely.
All right. And speaking of the benefits of detoxification when it comes to these metals, I'd like to go back to Peter in a moment. I'm going to segue with a question here about 5G because it goes into one of the questions that we also received from viewers. This stuff is all around, and presumably it affects all of us. What about the perps? How do they survive in an environment that they are, corrupting, polluting, and that sort of thing? Where they all got Faraday cages in their homes and in their cars and stuff, or how is it that it's either not affecting them, or they don't care that it's affecting them, or they don't believe it's affecting them, or they're protecting themselves?
It is affecting them.
Well, I can throw in my 2 cents. These guys are the opposite of us. We're about creation, they're about destruction. They want to destroy everything, including themselves. It makes no sense. They're not in it for the money. They just want to destroy. And ultimately, they will destroy themselves if they have their way. They're not going to have their way because we're here. It's just, you cannot understand it. But what you have to sort of picture the opposite of what you are, and that's what they are. And of course yes, they'll have some protection, but it's destroying them. I mean, the alumina alone, and of course I'm just concentrating on alumina because it gives me a legal way to destroy the entire program. It's just one of very many things. That alumina kills every living cell. They can detox themselves to a certain degree, but they're pulling the rug out from underneath themselves. The entire biosphere is at risk. It makes no sense, but that's what they're doing. So even if they have some mitigating factors, their ultimate thing is complete destruction. It's sad to say, but that's the fact of the matter.
Well, that's a question that we had from one of our listeners, Gray Boy. That isn't me, however. And also with the chemtrails, the chemicals in the atmosphere coming down, surely it affects them as well. Do any of our
Yes.
other speakers want to add their thoughts on how that could be, that or how they could exist in an environment untouched while it harms everyone else?
Yeah, I can throw some in there. I have a chapter in my book titled Solutions, and these are things that we can do. That most of the things in there are things that we can do, individuals, people who aren't incredibly wealthy. But if you're incredibly wealthy, you can totally avoid all this stuff. And let's just look at the incredibly wealthy people and what they could do to avoid all this. They have all the resources. First of all, the chemtrails are not sprayed in every area of the world. There are quite a few second and third world countries where chemtrails are not sprayed. They have not been seen. If you have enough money, apparently what these elitists of the world do is that they'll often buy up an armed compound with their own security down somewhere in a third world nation. And, they might live down there most of the year and be protected by their own security. You could also live on a yacht, which is another favorite thing of elitists. They love, whoever has the biggest yacht is like the coolest guy on the block or whatever. But they have their giant yachts, and they can live on those anywhere over in the ocean, anywhere they want. And there's not really a whole lot of point of spraying chemtrails out in the remote areas of the ocean, because there's no civilization to game financial markets off of it. So you can bet that most of the world's oceans are not sprayed with chemtrails. They'll do it offshore, if the prevailing winds will blow the stuff onshore into populated areas. But you can get away from chemtrails. Wyoming, the state of Wyoming here, and just in the contiguous 48 here, looks like someplace that has been relatively unaffected by chemtrails, and that's just because there's not much population there. There's not much stuff to game. They want to hit the population centers where you use energy, and where the temperature, the day's average temperature, has a tremendous effect upon how much energy people use, and this is the basis of the weather derivatives market. You could also, lastly, if you know exactly what this stuff is that you're being sprayed with, you could concoct some type of supplement that would counteract all the negative effects of these toxins. Patrick already showed us something that takes out aluminum. Well, if you're an elitist of the world, maybe you just get a bottle full of pills, or multiple bottles, or a case of bottles, and you pass them out to your family and say, don't ask any questions, just take one of these daily, and you'll be fine. So, and it goes on and on from there. There's plenty of things you can do to minimize the effect or completely get rid of chemtrails in people's lives.
Yeah, I recall one of you speakers mentioning silica, or was it Peter,
Yeah,
or was it Patrick?
No, it's me. Actually, I actually disagree with Peter on this. They do spray the entire planet. There is no part of the planet at all that does not get directly sprayed, apart from North Korea, where they don't fly directly over there, but the stuff in the Yellow Sea blows in over. Look around the oceans, they're spraying the crap out of everywhere. And it might not just be the telltale signs. You can see scumbaggery in all its forms all over the place. And yes, there are mitigating things you can use. Max Bliss and I were at the AAS meeting in San Jose in 2015, and we met a scientist from Tulane who knew a guy at Tulane who had developed a protein that would remove aluminum from living tissue. But they are not immune from, no matter how many countermeasures they take, they're going to be exposed to GMO pollen. The EMF stuff is hitting them too. You can't, and unless they're in like a Faraday cage and inside a mountain or something, they are also getting harmed. Yes, they'll have some mitigating circumstances. I think they'll probably want to destroy everyone else and then kill themselves. but they are also being harmed.
Well, I think
And
it's
one of the what
yeah. Oh,
what my approach has been to be that all the people who are working for the other side, they work for liars. They are not getting the full information of what protective measures to take, and they can't even give those to their loved ones because of national security, whatever. I want to help them too. They're not the enemy, they're our future friend. They're doing crappy things. You want the crappy things to stop, you go after the sin, not the sinner. But this is killing everything. Aluminum kills every cell there is.
Okay. If we could make it a little more of a back and forth, so we can cover a little more ground. We have other speakers in the Q&A. I will ask one more thing though, Patrick. You did say silica. I take diatomaceous earth, which is high in silica. It's the old diatoms from the ancient seafloor. And it has a great detoxifying effect, ionizing effect, and that's very, very, very good stuff. I'm wondering if that might not be a good thing for people to look into.
The way you get rid of aluminum is with soluble silicic acid, and whether if you put this diatomaceous earth in water, some of it comes out as silicic acid. If it does, great. But it has to be the soluble version. It's in Fiji water, it's in Shasta water, and I'm inviting everybody to find local water sources or even commercial bottles of water and get it tested for silica, aluminum, and fluoride, and send the results to me, and I'm going to publish them.
Well, great. Hopefully on your website we can find such recommendations. Okay, now somebody mentioned Bernard Vonnegut. The question from Gina, I think it's for Peter, is Bernard related to Kurt Vonnegut?
Yeah, oh yeah,
Brother.
I forgot to mention that. That's my favorite part. Yeah, it was Kurt Vonnegut's brother.
It's where Kurt gets some of his more spacey fantasy ideas from, futuristic ideas.
Look into Kurt Vonnegut's book, Ice 8.
Okay.
There's actually, I think there's a short story in a book called Cat's Cradle, which had a bunch of short stories in it. It's about some substance that was created in a laboratory, and any water that it touches immediately turns the water and all the water in that volume to ice. So there's something, I haven't actually read the book, but I've heard about it. Something about how they take this substance and it gets into the ocean and it turns the ocean to ice or something. This is interesting because Bernard Vonnegut, Kurt Vonnegut's brother, was working with what we call supercooled clouds. This means clouds below 0 degrees Celsius, if I'm not mistaken. Patrick would probably pick me up on that one, but really cold clouds. And so it has a lot to do with ice. And Bernard Vonnegut and Irving Langmuir were working on plane de-icing during World War II as well.
Okay, we have a question for Elana from Bill S. We're all up on this stuff, so we know what you all mean most of the time. There's terms that I don't even know myself, but we assume. Elana mentioned HAARP. What is that?
Oh my gosh. Okay. HAARP is the High Frequency Active Aurora Research Project up in Gakona, Alaska. It's a fantastic acronym that people often use to just talk about ionospheric heaters in general. But HAARP was unique in that the Air Force and Navy were involved in the experiments with HAARP after Bernard Eastland's 1987 patent. And when HAARP was fully functional, it was able to steer an incredible phased array antenna, RFs, microwaves, up to the ionosphere, zap a certain portion of the ionosphere deep in, bubbling the ionosphere itself out into the cosmos, and then in order to activate get the electrons off the atoms up there and get more ions to come down the magnetic lines of force into our atmosphere. And what I maintain is that the the experiments not only were, as the Air Force admitted, in an open meeting in Alaska, that they now could control the ionosphere. And that includes the over the horizon that Peter was talking about, but that they can actually turn our atmosphere into a mini ionosphere. And that's what I mean by an ionized atmosphere. We are ionized 24/7. And so the ionospheric heaters are still hitting the ionosphere and bringing down ions, but they're also learning to create their own ions and plasma. And by activating plasma structures in our atmosphere, they're able to keep the atmosphere ionized all the time for all those military operations in my last slide.
I'll ask you first, and this can go out to all the panelists. Now, I might be wrong about this, but as I understand it, the HARP program, there were something like 2 HARP arrays up in Alaska and 1 in Puerto Rico for the United States. I heard there was also 1 in Norway, and I heard the Russians and the Chinese have their own versions of these tools. A, is that correct? And B, if it is, doesn't that shoot the national security cover for this stuff right in the butt? I mean, you know, if the Russians and the Chinese already have this stuff, it seems like the only people being kept in the dark about it is the American public.
Yes, I agree. We've had those ionospheric heaters you mentioned. We had most of those before we ever had HARP. But HARP had the big power, and now we have many miniature HARP arrays type of ionospheric heaters, some of them mobile, many of them smaller, and able to operate more clandestinely than the big ones, the big guns. I don't think politically anymore in a nationalistic way. We're living in a global space age, and I think in terms of class. And not, you know, I'm not a communist by any means, but class is really what it's about to me. So the elites of China, Russia, United States, wherever, are all in league and have certain rules they operate by, such as at the Bilderberg meeting that happened this weekend. So we have to really learn to think in terms of class structure, with an oligarchy at the very, very top, and then the rest of us peons, us slave mentality people who will now be plugged in and will be influenced by frequencies pulsed into our brains. That's really the name of the game now.
And would any of our other panelists like to chime in on some of those points?
Well, it's HARP. When people talk about HARP, they talk in general about electromagnetic stuff that's been used against us. But look around where you live, all this 5G stuff. You look at the power cords going into these antennas that are really thick, and they're coming off the grid. There's ELF, there's VLF, there's stuff all over the place. If you look at the NextRad maps, they just light the entire planet up. So HARP is a facility, a big one for sure, but it's the entire electromagnetic thing. It's just this vast, huge thing. They haven't cracked them all up, but with our bodies being filled with these metals, you know, if they just crack that up on full power, they could just wipe out millions in an instant. It's very disturbing. Ugh.
Well, I also, and I'm going to use this as a segue, you'll see in a moment. I also like Patrick, and it was implied perhaps by others here, the notion that we're in a sort of a spiritual war here, because all of these things that we're talking about, metals and HARP and radio waves, it's all involved on the gross material plane of existence. Yet at the other end of the spectrum, on the spiritual side of things, okay, where it can be argued we really emanate from into this materiality. Okay, the psychopaths at the top have no spiritual sense at all. All they have is the gross material plane to play with, and they think they own it because they've accumulated so much gross material wealth, and they start messing with this stuff. And here's the segue. They're also big, and for that, they're limited. They have no concept of spirituality, so they want to live forever, okay, in the gross material. It's impossible, but they're going to try to do it. And here we go into transhumanism. All right. They want to put their brains into a computer. They want to, you know, gradually replace the body with material stuff that won't wear out or that can be replaced and all of that sort of thing. Do any of you think that maybe this is their solution to the toxification and the contamination of the environment, that they think, oh, yeah, it's not too long before we're going to be able to just you know, be immune from this stuff because we're going to control our physical bodies as well? Anything along those lines, or transhumanism in general?
Yeah.
Oh, well, this is, go ahead. Go ahead, Peter.
No, you can go. I just want to throw this one thing out there. What comes to mind are the trees, the carbon capture trees that they're making, right? What do natural trees do? They turn carbon dioxide into oxygen. Well, they're talking about making these trees that do the same thing that natural trees do. So what the heck do we need those for? You know what I mean? In other words, we might need those type of trees if the soil is so contaminated that it can't sustain, if our environment can't sustain natural trees. So they're looking to supplant God with Lucifer, basically.
Yes, and that's the important part. The view of transhumanism really has to deepen. It isn't just that they want immortality in the flesh at all. That's what they trot out in the mainstream media. What they want, and I disagree that they don't have a spiritual life. The ones at the very top, the ones that I think his name is Ronald Bernard talks about. He talks about the recent investment guy, the financial
right, the Dutch gentleman.
Yes, he makes it very clear they have a spiritual vision called Satanism. They have a very dark, death-loving vision of life. They want to be as gods on this planet. I'm sure they'd love to have immortality, but they're very far from that. I do know that. But they want us different. They want to tinker with our humanity. And this is what angers me the most deeply and has been behind now 8 years in this movement is we can't go there. We can't go there. This human race has many foibles, has many weaknesses. Yes, we're very frail creatures. We don't have the speed of the leopard. We don't have, the intelligence of an AI. In the sense of a mechanical intelligence. No, we don't. But we are on a trail of evolution, and I don't mean physical, I mean a spiritual consciousness evolution. And one of our main tenets as human beings is that we have free will. Now, most people don't know how to use free will, and most people seem to be satisfied with the free will of a 3-year-old. But I still want them to be able to choose how they spend their life here on Earth, their 70, 80, 90 years. I do not want to be tethered to an artificial intelligence. I do not want to be tethered to a satellite and a 5G in my neighborhood. I want people to have that freedom to do or not do. This is what human evolution has been for, I would say, millions of years. And now these upstarts, these hubristic, pedophile psychopaths want to turn us through the Ebner effect in a generation into another entity. And this must be fought tooth and nail and spirit. So that's how I see transhumanism. It's already begun. I'm meeting people who are brain dead. They are in some electromagnetic place that is really not in the old culture we had, and yet not in the culture coming, which will be very cyborg, I believe. So we're in a transitional phase now, and I think that, yes, they are certainly tapping my phone, my internet. They want to know everything I think. They want to know what Patrick thinks. They want to know what everyone thinks about this, because they are in process from transition of one era and when nature ran everything to another era when they themselves will run this planet is their great global wet dream. That's how I see it.
Well, it is very hubristic, as you said. Who wanted to comment? Is that
that was it's Jerry Day? I'm sorry, I don't have
Jerry.
just I want to confirm and back up what Elana is talking about. The word is depopulation. When you are a psychopath, when you are a sociopath, when you happen to be one of those two things and a billionaire, you can apply your money to an agenda, and you can have a global or a national impact on that agenda. And the sociopathic mentality is when you see someone else's stuff, you want it. When you see what someone else has, you want to have it. For hundreds of years now, back to the Fabian Society in the 1700s, they've talked openly about depopulation and how we need to wipe out all these people and
Malthus,
take
all the way back to Malthus before that.
Yes,
And the
exactly.
Greeks.
Exactly. When you have the monetary system we have, you have the possibility of massive amounts of disparity. So one person can be worth $10 billion, another person worth nothing. And look at the disparity there. Look at what influence that 10 billionaire can have compared to the poverty individual. So we have a campaign of depopulation, and we see it all around us in our foods and our waters and the toxicity in the things they sell us. You know, they sell us all these like toxic bathroom cleaning chemicals and then punish us for being toxic and not recycling properly or all this. It is such a two-faced thing going on. You know, we're supposed to be hyper environmentalists now, and at the same time, the corporations that are tied in with government that are telling us to be hyper environmentalists are selling us Comet toilet cleaner. They're selling us all these extremely toxic. Just look through any hardware store, even grocery stores, even the soaps we use. You know, obviously the food additives, the food processing, the glyphosates in the agriculture, the things that the corporations are using are where the problems are coming from, not in our individual daily behavior. And so we are to be taxed under carbon tax. We're to be punished. We are to be criminals because we're exhaling CO2, which is supposed to be a poison. It's just absurd information we're getting. We are actually not the problem. It is the corporations the problem, and is the depopulation is the problem. And when you look at the concept of depopulation, it starts to answer so many questions.
The eugenicists, they even made it all the way to Germany. And the Germans at the end of the war said, "What's your problem with our depopulation program of the Jews? We got it from you folks." That's when they changed the name of the Eugenics Society, something else in the United States. Yeah, it's always blame the little guy, isn't it? You know, I really noticed this. I was a young man in West Berlin in the Army during the first of the oil embargoes. And, it was shocking to get the newspaper clippings. That's how you did it back in those days from your family about the lines and everything. But you could see this blame the little guy crap happening back then. It was called, and you can Google this one, America's Addiction to Oil. Well, excuse me, I'm not an addict, and I don't really want oil, but y'all at the top, that's all you're offering us. You know what I mean? Right. So now they'll give us a carbon tax. Elana, I would caution, however, or whoever said it before, yes, the Luciferian, what have you, but these are pseudo spiritualities. It's not the real deal. In the Hindu and Buddhist cosmology, they describe two different levels of godlike realms where we can incarnate into, and these people think they're gods and all, and they're not. I mean, they are in the sense compared to the way we live. They live fantastic lives for a really long time, but even there, it's limited. It's when you become enlightened, and that's only through a spiritual process that you're beyond all of this stuff, and maybe you try to help people. But I would, it's not really a spiritual thing. Ultimately, a spiritual process is going to I believe, in my opinion, lead to such an understanding of reality that that you live it to its fullest, which results in enlightenment, which inherently means you're not harming anybody anymore.
If I can chime in here, so I've been through a spiritual upgrade, I suppose. I know more stuff. I understand there's suckiness, there's an awesomeness. And those are directions. You can be more awesome or less awesome. The epitome of awesomeness is a choice, a direction you go in. And we are at different levels of awareness, and we are spirits and there are other spirits. When you align yourself with the awesomeness, you get help from awesomeness. When you align yourself with the other side, you get help from the other side. People do make deals with the devil, if you want to call him the devil, and they will get inspiration and help from that. And that's how a very small number of people can do a huge amount of crappiness. But we can do exactly the same things with opposite intent. We can overpower them. I mean, of course, you need to know that there's a problem. Like if you like the squeaky hinge, you need to know the squeaky hinge before you can put some oil on it. And I see, that's like a binary thing, like yes, no, up, down, left, right, hot, cold, wet, dry, awesome, not awesome. And we go in from one side to the other. If there is an extreme in one side, that creates an extreme on the other. Perhaps the suckiness right now is the other side reacting to our awakening and this golden age we're going to go into, and they're going, what can we do? The only thing that they know how to do is suck and hurt and kill and maim and all that kind of stuff. So they're doing more of it, perhaps because of us. But regardless, we cannot be overcome by the other side, just because hot cannot overcome cold or vice versa. Because if any one of these things went unipolar, there'd be a complete collapse and existence would blink out. We are proof that the other side cannot overwhelm us. If they say, if you don't like broccoli, they can't make you like broccoli. They cannot get you to agree with their bad ideas. You just recognize them for being bad ideas and not do them. Spirit is a thing. It is absolutely real. I know this is a fact. You have to do, and anyone, we can all perform spiritual work. If you, in the course of your day, if you choose to do a good thing or something less sucky, and then see what happens from that point, more good comes from it. And when you do more of it, things supposedly outside your control somehow work in your benefit. We are part of this whole existence, and it absolutely is a thing. I consider spirit as just as real as electromagnetic waves, pressure, kinetic energy, and all of these other physical things. It's another thing, but it actually supersedes the entire physical plane we are in. And once you get used to that, you can perform awesomeness. And it absolutely, and yes, of course they are absolutely spiritual. If you look into the mystery schools, they mix science with spirituality. It's integral. They have to use it. It's not, you can't have one without the other. They absolutely use it. We absolutely use it, and we're gonna win. Well, not win. We cannot be overwhelmed. We're not gonna be able to eliminate darkness, nor would we want to. But when there's extremes on both sides.
Well, I submit to you, they're tinkering with the gross material plane. There are many beings who have mastered the spiritual, and in fact, a handful of them have been known by all of humanity. When you compare that to who are the masters of the dark side and all that, it's a pseudo. It's not. I don't believe it is a real spiritual path, but And that's why they're afraid of those people, and they try to kill them because just one individual could make such a powerful difference without any money, without any jetliners or chemicals or radio waves or anything, just by speaking. But in any case, speaking as we have, I want to thank everyone.
I'd like to add something really quick right
Yeah,
before
sure.
the wrap up. I think we're winning, and I see evidence of it. There's a article in today's UK Daily Mail where George Soros is saying that everything that could go wrong has gone wrong. I'm hoping that includes chemtrails. We're winning.
Mr. Wrong himself, right? In any case, and I would add, by the way, the Fabian Socialists, I would add anyone interested in that, in the degradation of society, take a look at the Frankfurt School as well. But in any case, thank you all so much for taking time out of your busy schedules and joining us here at the Deep Truth Conference. Let's go quickly. Alan, one more time, your two websites where people can go to get more information?
NoLiesRadio.org.
All right, I'm sorry. I meant Jerry because it says Alan.
Yeah.
Jerry, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I have two websites people might be interested in. They have to do with smart meters largely. One is called freedomtaker.com, where I have posted notices for your power company, how to notice them on their criminal trespass and the laws they're breaking, and give them a cease and desist and et cetera, notice of liability, those kind of things. That's at freedomtaker.com. And then if you want to scan your environment for your exposures, we've simplified that with some offering of some basic scanning meters, so you can scan your radio frequencies, your electric fields, your magnetic fields, and with explanatory tutorial videos with those meters where you can tell how to use them, how to read them, what they mean. And very important for anybody especially who might be electromagnetic sensitive, to have a scanning meter and have it with them always.
Very, very good. And we're way over time, so please keep it brief. Elana, where can people go to get your writings, learn about your books and so forth?
ElanaFreeland.com, and also on Amazon. The books are available there.
Thank you so much for your work and for making it available. Patrick?
StopSprayingUs.com. And I'm on social media, Patrick Roddie, Roddie. You'll find me on Facebook and YouTube and so on.
That's quite simple. StopSprayingUs.com. What a wonderful thought. And then finally,
I have another one. It's Stop Effing With Us. If you can fill out the F
yeah. That wouldn't be any fun. Okay, and then Peter, where people can go to get your work.
Yeah, my book is called Chemtrails Exposed: A New Manhattan Project. It's available at Amazon.com. My website is peterakirby.com. That's my middle initial A. And I'm a staff writer at activistpost.com. You can find my latest articles there.
All right. Well, I want to thank you all very much. We are going to take a much needed break. Our next presentation will be at 2:30 New York time. It'll be on Zionism Deconstructing the Power Paradigm, and it'll be moderated by Kevin Barrett. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you at the next segment.
Thank you.